What historical fact makes you cry? The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. The doors to the exit and the stairwells were locked, so you either had to jump out the window or be burned alive. A story from my great-grandfather, who fought in WW1. Soldiers would cease fire to pick up their men's bodies and would have a smoke together, go back to their trenches, and start firing again. Neither side of frontline soldiers actually wanted to be there, just drafted for war. One of the girls in the Donner Party was fed her dead mother and told afterwards they had an agreement to not feed people their family members, but they had broken off from the camp in an attempt to find rescue. She would randomly burst into tears about it at school years later. The whole story of the Donner Party is so horrible and sad, and it bothers me that it's just used for cannibal jokes. The thing about the Donners that really gets you is that if you read the accounts, you're confused in your 21st century thinking. To us, all these people in wagons were pioneers, explorers, outdoors people. We think that should be able to hunt and clean meat and build shelter and forage, etc. But what you realize whole reading is that these were not outdoors people. They were headed to California, but were basically people from the suburbs. They didn't have any outdoor skills. No one knew how to do anything. It was less like pioneers in challenging times than if your plane crashed in Antarctica and you had no supplies and had never seen snow. And the craziest part isn't even the girl who ate her mom. It was the one guy with any outdoor skills, William Eddy. He shot animals, did whatever he could for the camp, but was kind of poor, so no one would help him while he was helping them. Then when he saw they could escape or die, he begged someone to watch his wife and 2-year-old and set off to find help. He eventually made it out and had search and rescue parties sent. But once those groups found the camp, the rich folks paid them to save them first, and almost 100% of those people survived. So this dude had to go back to the camp himself and beg people to help him. He finally got like one guy to go back to the camp, but by the time they got there, his wife and the other lady, who had been taking care of like 9 orphaned kids, had just died, and the kids were defenseless. The guy literally shows up to find one of the last adult men eating the meat off the bone of his toddler's leg. Even then the guy basically can't ignore his humanity and tells the other guy to get out or be murdered. I wouldn't have made the same offer. TL, DNR. William Eddy was the hero of the Donner Party, but was screwed over and had his whole family eaten. What the actual duck? After the Pearl Harbor attack, at least some men were alive in a pocket of air inside one of the capsized ships. Navy personnel could hear them banging on the hull and trying to signal for help, but there was no way to get at them safely. The water was full of fuel and oil, so blowtorches weren't a workable idea, and there was no way for divers to get into the ship because the damage had rendered the whole thing a death trap of twisted steel. There wasn't even any way to communicate with the trap men, so the guards at Pearl Harbor had to listen to those calls for help getting weaker and weaker, while inside everyone slowly suffocated. When they hauled the ship up for scrap later, there were 16 notches scratched onto the wall of that compartment, which means at least one casualty of Pearl Harbor lived until December 23, 1941. Teddy Roosevelt's mother Mitty and his wife Alice, who had just given birth days before, both died in the same house on the same day, hours apart from each other. In his diary entry that day, he drew a large black X and scribbled, "The light has gone out of my life." That's some heavy shit right there, man. Sacagawea, who accompanied Lewis and Clark on their expedition to explore the lands we now know as the Western United States, had a vital coincidence on the journey that always makes me emotional to think about. She was born a Shoshone, but was taken around the age of 12 and made a slave to the Hidatsa. After being with them for 3 or so years, she was sold to a French man named Toussaint Charbonneau, who took her as a wife. When Lewis and Clark met her, she was about 16 years old and pregnant with Charbonneau's child. The birth was a tough one, and Lewis helped with the child's safe delivery before Sacagawea and Charbonneau joined them on the expedition. Lewis and Clark knew they would meet the Shoshone on their journey and were hoping Sacagawea could help them procure some supplies, especially horses, to help them cross the Rocky Mountains. Sacagawea didn't speak English. She spoke Shoshone and Hidatsa. Charbonneau spoke Hidatsa in French, and one of the members of Lewis and Clark's expedition spoke French and English. Suffice to say, translation was complicated and complex. When the expedition finally came upon the Shoshones territory, they agreed to meet and hear Lewis and Clark's proposal. They sat down around the fire and began negotiations. The chief of the tribe began to speak with Sacagawea and the conversation proceeded rapidly. The others, unable to really understand what was going on, were confused when she and the chief began to cry, and then to embrace. In the years since her capture, it turned out, Sacagawea's brother had become chief. He had believed her dead, and she did not recognize him at first. The celebration, when the tribe learned who she was, and the appreciation bestowed upon Lewis and Clark for returning her, is hard to completely express. From Wikipedia, Lewis recorded their reunion in his journal. Shortly after Captain Clark arrived with the interpreter Charbonneau, and the Indian woman, who proved to be a sister of the chief Kami Wait. The meeting of those people was really affecting, particularly between Sacagawea and an Indian woman, who had been taken prisoner at the same time with her, and who had afterwards escaped from the Minotaurs and rejoined her nation. Whenever I start to think about what she went through, from her capture and slavery among the Hidatsas, to her being taken as a wife by Charbonneau, traveling across largely unknown lands with people whose language she didn't speak, to finally being reunited with her family, it always makes me emotional. She went through so much. I learned about this in a Dan Cullen podcast. During the German-Soviet War, there was a Red Army soldier who sang each night with a hauntingly beautiful voice. His comrades would give him their tea rations and scarves to protect his larynx. One night, he couldn't sing because he had gotten sick. A German soldier crawled across no man's land and tossed something into the Soviet trench. The Soviet soldiers thought it was a grenade. However, it was a package containing a letter asking if the singer was okay and if he needed medicine. A truly heartwarming moment in an otherwise horrific front. Edit. Thanks for the awards and upvotes. Seriously, though, if you are even remotely interested in history, you can't go wrong with hardcore history. I never knew that I wanted to listen to a man talk about a topic for 16 hours. The Christmas truce of 1914 is also amazing. Soldiers created an unofficial truce for Christmas and celebrated the eve and the day together. I have also heard that the soldiers refused to fight each other for weeks after because they actually saw the humanity in each other. It was after threat of tyranny and execution that they began to fight. Edit. The soldiers on both fronts were switched with soldiers from different fronts to keep the fight going. The rape of Nanking in 1937. Looking up photos of what the Japanese did there left me silent for a while. They raped and murdered women. Bayoneted babies. You can look up a photo of it. Use the wounded as rifle and bayonet practice. Forced mothers on their sons and fathers on their daughters. And made a contest out of beheading civilians. There is a Japanese newspaper article you can look up about it. It's disgusting. And the worst part about it is that the Japanese government denies most of these acts, along with a lot of other war crimes that they committed afterwards. It always shakes me to my core to know that human beings are capable of doing such horrible things to one another and smile while doing it. A letter from the Civil War by Sullivan Ballow. My very dear Sarah, the indications are very strong that we shall move in a few days, perhaps tomorrow. Lest I should not be able to write again, I feel impelled to write a few lines that may fall under your eye when I shall be no more. I have no misgivings about or lack of confidence in the cause in which I'm engaged, and my courage does not halt or falter. I know how strongly American civilization now leans on the triumph of the government, and how great a debt we owe to those who went before us through the blood and sufferings of the revolution. And I'm perfectly willing to lay down all my joys in this life to help maintain this government and to pay that debt. Sarah, my love for you is deathless. It seems to bind me with mighty cables that nothing but omnipotence could break, and yet my love of country comes over me like a strong wind and bears me unresistably on with all these chains to the battlefield. The memories of the blissful moments I have spent with you come creeping over me, and I feel most gratified to God and to you that I have enjoyed them for so long, and hard it is for me to give them up and burn to ashes the hopes of future years when, God willing, we might still have lived and loved together and seen our sons grown up to honorable manhood. Around us, I have, I know, but few and small claims upon divine providence. But something whispers to me, perhaps it is the wafted prayer of my little Edgar, that I shall return to my loved ones unharmed. If I do not, my dear Sarah, never forget how much I love you. And when my last breath escapes me on the battlefield, it will whisper your name. Forgive my many faults and the many pains I have caused you. How thoughtless and foolish I have oftentimes been. How gladly would I wash out with my tears every little spot upon your happiness. But, oh Sarah, if the dead can come back to this earth and flit unseen around those they loved, I shall always be near you, in the gladdest days, and in the darkest nights always, always. And if there be a soft breeze upon your cheek, it shall be my breath. As the cool air fans your throbbing temple, it shall be my spirit passing by. Sarah, do not mourn me dead, think I am gone, and wait for thee, for we shall meet again. Sullivan Ballard was killed a week later at the First Battle of Bull Run, July 21st, 1861. It doesn't exactly make me cry, but Albert Göring, the staunchly anti-Nazi brother of Hermann Göring, spent the Second World War helping Jews and dissidents to escape. He was caught several times, but was let off the hook due to his brother's influence within the Reich. After the war, he was shunned for his last name and his accomplishments forgotten. Irish unmarried moms were sometimes required to live in institutions, raising their own babies, until they were adopted. Imagine knowing how cute your kid was, taking care of it, knowing you couldn't keep it. Sometimes they were as old as 2 or 3 when adopted. The movie Philomena dealt with this topic. When Alexander Hamilton's eldest son died, his second child Angelica Hamilton had a mental breakdown and she never recovered. Sometimes, her family would walk into a room with only her in it, and she would be speaking to her dead brother. WW1, Mercy Dogs. They would go out into no man's land and find wounded soldiers. They would bring medical supplies for the soldiers to patch themselves up, or if the soldier was too mortally wounded, stay and comfort them in their final moments. Henry Gunther was an American soldier killed during WWI at 10:59 am on November 11th, 1918, 1 minute before the armistice took effect at 11 am. Gunther charged a German roadblock outfitted with machine guns. German soldiers tried waving him off, knowing the war would come to an end in mere moments. Apparently he got too close, fired a couple rounds, and was promptly shot and killed instantly. There were approximately 300 infants and children that were murdered in Jonestown, being forcibly fed or injected with cyanide. I feel so much pain for all the victims, but the kids in particular make me ache with despair. There were some teens that weren't among the number, because they were gone playing a basketball tournament. In WWI, an American pilot named Charles Brown was flying a B-17 in a bomb raid over Germany, where his aircraft was severely shot up and entered a free fall when Brown passed out. When Brown awoke, he was only a few thousand feet above the ground and barely was able to recover the aircraft. When the Luftwaffe spotted a limping B-17 far below the formation, they dispatched a pilot named Franz Stigler, a soon-to-be ace just 1 kill away, with 2 downed B-17s earlier that day. As he approached from the rear, Stigler noticed that the B-17's tail gunner didn't move, and after further inspection, realized he and several other gunners were dead. Stigler saw this, and remembered what his flight instructor had said years ago: "If you shoot a man in a parachute, I'll shoot you myself." Stigler saw this limping B-17 as no different from a downed pilot in a parachute. To prevent German flak cannons from taking it out, Stigler flew in formation with the B-17 all the way until the English Channel, where it landed safely. Stigler never mentioned the incident, and cold bean court-martialed for it. Decades later, Charles went looking for the enemy pilot that saved his life that fateful day, and eventually met him face to face, becoming close friends and dying just a few months apart from each other in 2008. Please subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.